السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. We continue inshallah ta'ala with the book Zad al-Mustaqni', and we're going through al-Murbi', which describes and explains Zad al-Mustaqni'. And this is where we stopped at that statement, وَلَا يَرْفَعُ حَدَثَ رَجُلٍ طَهُورٌ يَسِيرٌ. But before we start, having your PDF or your book with you, I'll just read it once from the beginning, inshallah ta'ala. So follow from the beginning, inshallah. I'm just going to read it once, what we already covered from Zad al-Mustaqni'. So go back, not to the introduction, but from the beginning of Kitab al-Tahara. So go back from Kitab al-Tahara and just look at Zad al-Mustaqni' only. The matn, whether it's in the red or you have it separate. It's good to have Zad al-Mustaqni' separate to memorize it, to read it on its own. So I would read it inshallah ta'ala. So he says, from the beginning, Kitab al-Tahara, وهي ارتفاع الحدث وما في معناه وزوال الخبث. المياه ثلاثة: طهور لا يرفع الحدث ولا يزيل النجس الطارئ غيره، وهو الباقي على خلقته، فإن تغير بغير ممازج كقطع كافور ودهن أو بملح مائي أو سخن بنجس كره، وإن تغير بمكثه أو بما يشق صون الماء عنه من نابت فيه أو ورق شجر أو بمجاورة ميتة أو سخن بالشمس أو بطاهر لم يكره، وإن استعمل في طهارة مستحبة كتجديد وضوء وغسل جمعة وغسلة ثانية وثالثة كره، وإن بلغ قلتين وهو الكثير وهما 500 رطل عراقي تقريبا فخالطته نجاسة غير بول آدمي أو عذرته المائعة فلم تغيره أو خالطه البول أو العذرة ويشق نزحه كمصانع طريق مكة فطهور. This is where we start. And hopefully till this point everything is clear. And with al-Murbi', what we went through also is clear. And when you read it, when you understand it, and if you have any questions, make sure, inshallah ta'ala, that you have your questions answered, but only what we have and what we're studying, not masail, other masail or situations. This is different setup, inshallah ta'ala. So now he says, this is where we stopped. وَلَا يَرْفَعُ حَدَثَ رَجُلٍ. I'm reading first Zad al-Mustaqni'. I'm reading the red, Zad al-Mustaqni'. ولا يرفع حدث رجل طهور يسير خلت به امرأة لطهارة كاملة عن حدث. This is now the مسألة. So here ولا يرفع حدث رجل, we're still in the طهور, we're still in the first category of water. The طهور, the purifying water that is pure in itself and it purifies others, can be used for wudu and ghusl. So he says here, Imam al-Hajjawi fi Zad al-Mustaqni', وَلَا يَرْفَعُ حَدَثَ رَجُلٍ. Hadath, we talked about al-hadath. So when a person in state of not in wudu, whether it's major hadath or minor hadath, لا يرفع, that means it does not elevate, does not lift the hadath of a man. وَخُنْثَ, the hermaphrodite, which we're not sure if he's a man or not. طَهُورٌ يَسِيرٌ. طَهُور, so this is in the first category still, purifying water, but it's yasir. What's yasir means? Yasir is a small amount, something yasir. على الكافرين غير يسير, as it's mentioned in the Quran. ومن أوتي كتابه بيمينه فسوف يحاسب حسابا يسيرا. Those who receive the book with the right hand, they will have an easy reckoning. Yasir. So Yasir here meaning small. And the ulama in fiqh, they don't write things just for the, for people to read and they can interpret it their own ways. Every word has its own definition and terminology. And quyud meaning restrictions. So what is Yasir? The previous mas'ala that we did last night or last time described to us what is Yasir and what is Kathir. So what constitutes lots of water versus the opposite, which is not enough water or less or few amount of water, is dun al-qullatayn. So al-qullatayn is the criteria to know whether it's lots of water or small amount of water. If it's less than the qullatayn, then it's called yasir. And the rulings that applies, if you remember. If it's less than qullatayn and a najasa falls, if a najasa falls according to the madhab, and the water is less than the qullatayn, it doesn't matter if it changed or not the characteristics of the water is najis. It is not permissible to be used, even if the water did not change whatsoever. If it changes, it's obvious whether it's lots of water or less. This is if it's less than the qullatayn. If it's more than the qullatayn, if the najasa, the impurity falls in it, and nothing changes in it, then the water is pure, of course. If it changes, then of course it's najis. So that's a difference. So here, now going back to the same mas'ala here. وَلَا يَرْفَعُ حَدَثَ رَجُلٍ وَخُنْثَ طَهُورٌ يَسِيرٌ. So there's going to be something mentioned here that it doesn't change the hadath of the man and the hermaphrodite. That means if you use this water that is going to be mentioned right now, it doesn't make him in state of wudu, does not make him in state of purification. What is this water? خلت به امرأة. خلت به. خلت به امرأة, that means a woman was alone with it. That's خلت به. الخلاء, the خلاء, for example, the bathroom, because a person is away from others. So خلت به الخلو من الشيء. That means when someone does not have something or someone that is secluded with something. So the water here that a woman is alone with. And he says in الروضة كخلوة نكاح. كخلوة نكاح, like the nikah khalwa, meaning no one is seeing her. That means the door is closed. I mean, doesn't have to be the door is closed, but it means no one sees her whatsoever. So if a woman, and this is the surah, the how we perceive the mas'ala here. A woman, he says here, we have to write the many conditions here that applies for this mas'ala because it has to fulfill these conditions that are mentioned, not just general things. So we have here a woman and she's alone with tahur yasir, with small amount of water, and she's mukallafa, ولو كافرة امرأة, so that means she's mukallafa, that means she reached the age of puberty, so not a girl, even if she's kafira, even if she's a disbeliever. لطهارة كاملة, we're still not finished yet with all of these conditions that has to be met first for the ruling to be that this water does not change the state of a man that wants to make wudu with. So again, so she is the tahur is yasir, the tahur is less. It's a woman and she's alone with it. And this woman, that means she's mukallafa even if she's disbeliever. And the other condition, لطهارة كاملة. She's alone with this water, and she's using it to make a complete tahara. Complete tahara. That means if she start making wudu with it and she's alone, no one is seeing her, and then someone walked in and he was seeing her, that means this mas'ala here does not apply. So it has to be a complete tahara. That means she used it from the beginning to the end. عن حدث, that the tahara was a complete tahara from being trying to lift her status of being an hadath, from hadath to be in wudu. So she had to be in the state of the religious impurity or the ruling of impurity, which is not impurity. That means she has to take a shower, she has to make wudu because she broke her wudu. So this tahara is to change her status from being not in tahara to be in tahara. So if we count here how many conditions, that if these conditions are applied, then this water, it is not permissible to be used for tahara, for wudu or ghusl, only for a man. Only for a man. So it can be used for a child, can be used for another woman, only for a man. So count these things, inshallah. Again, I'll read it again. ولا يرفع حدث رجل. So here it's only رجل. وخنثى, hermaphrodites, because we're in doubt. So this is, he added this to it. So لا يرفع حدث. It does not change the status of the person, does not make him in state of tahara, of purification. This is wudu or ghusl. So it has to be a man, only for a man only. And this water has to be tahurun yasir. It's a small amount of water, less than the qullatin. Number one. Khalat bihi, khalwa. So the khalwa is number two. That means she's alone. And she's amra'a, number three. She's a woman, and she is, when we say woman, that means she is not a child. She reached the age of puberty, even if she's a disbeliever. So if you want to add mukallafa as number four, that's fine, or that's included. So let's say number four, mukallafa. So she's a woman and she is mukallafa. That means she is reached the age of puberty. لطهارة كاملة. So it has to be that she used this water for a complete tahara, not in the middle someone walks in. لطهارة كاملة, that means a complete tahara. عن حدث. The tahara has to be from hadath, has to be from the fact that she was not in tahara. She was not in wudu, she was in janaba, for example, or not in wudu, and she used this water. So if these things applies, then a man, and only a man, an adult man, cannot use this water for wudu or ghusl. Before we continue, this water is tahur. That's why he mentioned it in tahur. The water here is not najis, it's not impure. The water is tahur, and it's not tahir. It's not the second category, because it's still water. But this is a special ruling only for an adult man to use this water. So that, as it's going to be mentioned, that as Imam Ahmad rahimahullah, he said that it's a matter of ta'abbud. It's a ta'abbudi matter. We don't know the illah, we don't know the wisdom behind it. It's like, why dhuhr salah is 4 rak'ah? This is how it is. So this is without knowing, is it because of the water changed to be tahir? No. Is it because the water becomes najis, impure? No. Does it belittle, for example, women? No, it doesn't. This is a matter of ta'abbudi, amr ta'abbudi, because another woman can use it, a child can use it. And the fact that if a man is present, then all of these things do not apply. All of these things do not apply. And this is, if you want to make a note of this, this is what's mentioned here. And there's another riwayah, there's another narration from Imam Ahmad rahimahullah, that this is valid to be used anyway, because there's other hadith of Maymuna radiallahu anha. But anyway, so hopefully we understand these few sentences here. Then he says, لِنَهْيِ النَّبِيِّ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وسلم. Why this ruling is there? Because the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام forbade, and that's the hadith, أن يتوضأ الرجل بفضل طهور المرأة. That the man يتوضأ, makes wudu, with the fadl. Al-fadl here, the what's left, what's extra. And the word fadl, if it's used in the context of the bounty, the favors, but here it means fadl tahur, that means what's left after the tahur of a woman. And that's what even the fadl as a bounty, that's where it comes from. That means it's not a right, it's an extra thing. So, when يتوضأ الرجل بفضل طهور المرأة, a woman used water in a container. All of these rulings, if it's used from a container. So if people are using water from the shower or from a tap water, then all of these rulings do not apply. It's only if it's a container. So if a woman makes wudu from a container, and the water that is left in the container, if these conditions up there is applied, then it is not permissible only for an adult man to use it for wudu or tahara. Can an adult man use it to remove impurity from his body? Yes. Can he use it to take a shower for cooling off? Or yes, because the water is not najis, is not an impure water, and it's still water, but it's only for the wudu and the ghusl of an adult man. So that's why it's ta'abbudi. It's based on a matter of ibadah. Is not because of a illah or a wisdom behind it when it comes to the purity or the non-purity of the water. He says here, رواه أبو داود وغيره. The hadith is reported by Imam Abi Dawud and others. وحسنه الترمذي, and Imam الترمذي said it's Hasan. وصححه ابن حبان. Ibn Hibban, he authenticated it. قال أحمد, he says, قال أحمد في رواية أبي طالب. Imam Ahmad رحمه الله, he said, أكثر أصحاب رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يقولون ذلك. Most of the companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they say that. Most of the companions of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasallam, they say that, meaning that it's the ruling as we mentioned. وَهُوَ تَعَبُّدِي. This is the word here that you need to make sure that you remember. تَعَبُّدِي. And when the word ta'abbudi is mentioned in the fiqh, right, I want you to get this note clear, inshallah. And this is one of the reason why there is some differences of opinions is because of the subject, so that we respect the ulama and not to think that it's just a, hadith and that's it. So whether, this ruling is mentioned because it's a matter of ta'abbudi or it's ma'qul al-ma'na, meaning there's a wisdom behind it that we understand based on reason. So for example, if the hadith as the Prophet ﷺ said, is it because of the water is changed, or is just there's no reason mentioned here, so that's the end of it? So this is where some of the rulings or some of the masail that comes in place is like it's going to come, inshallah ta'ala, when a person wakes up in the middle of the night to use water from a container. The Prophet ﷺ forbade of the person to immerse his hands in the container before he wash it outside, because he doesn't know where his hands were present during the night. So this is it something that we know or we don't know? So this is where sometimes the difference of opinions, whether we know the illah, whether we know the wisdom behind it. So if the illah or the wisdom behind it is not there, then the ruling is different. Or there's no illah that is known. It's a ta'abbudi matter. Like you don't use reason when it's the command of Allah in a matter of ibadah. It doesn't have to make sense to you. It's not against one's intellect and reason. This is to be obedient to Allah. So for example, as I said, Salatul Dhuhr 4 rak'ah. You can use reason. You can say 5 is better, 5 is odd number, 3 is enough, 2 is sufficient. You can say whatever you want, but this is not deen. The deen is that Allah commanded and people follow. There's a wisdom behind it, definitely. But when it comes to the matter of ta'abbudi, that means this is how it is, and that means a person has to follow that. And of course, it has a illah, but we do not know. This is where he says, وَهُوَ تَعَبُّدِي. وَهُوَ تَعَبُّدِي. وَعُلِمَ مِمَّا تَقَدَّمْ. He says here, we're completing the sharh. And once we finish here, we finish the tahur, or the first type of water. وَعُلِمَ مِمَّا تَقَدَّمْ. So, عُلِمَ, passive tense of alima. So now it's known from what's mentioned before. Now the conclusion of what all of what's mentioned here. What's the benefit? What's some of the rulings that applies based on this mas'ala, this matter? أنه يزيل النجس مطلقا. أنه, what's أنه? That it removes, يزيل, that it removes النجس, the impurity, مطلقا, at all times, in all conditions, in the absolute sense. What is أنه here? He refers to this mas'ala that we just finished, which means if a water that a woman used alone from a container to make wudu or to make ghusl, and no one is with her, no one is seeing her, right? Then for a man, and other than the man, anyone, this water can remove najasa, no doubt about this, because the water is not najis. The water is still tahur. But it's only for the adult man that is not tahur, meaning he cannot use it for tahar. So these are the rulings for this water that we just mentioned. A woman was alone with it and she made tahara with it. Tahara wajiba, an obligatory tahara. That this water that is left in the container removes all kinds of najasa, no harm about no conditions to this whatsoever. And the second thing, وأنه يرفع حدث المرأة والصبي. It's يرفع حدث المرأة, so it lifts the state of none being in wudu for a woman and a child, whether it's girl or boy, it doesn't matter. That means it can be used for ghusl, can be used for wudu for a woman and for a child. The other ruling here, number 3, وأنه لا أثر لخلوتها بالتراب. وأنه, this water that she was alone with, لا أثر لخلوتها. There is no effect whatsoever, or that ruling does not apply if she was alone. لخلوتها. الخلوة is, we said, when she's alone. And the alif here, the ضمير, refers to the woman. لخلوتها بالتراب. If she's alone with turab, with dust, making tayammum, and no one is with her, no one is seeing her, can an adult man use that same dust for tayammum? Yes, he can, because the hadith is about the water only. So the turab or the dust for tayammum does not apply. Because again, why do we say this? Why we cannot use analogy here? Because of this word. Because it's ta'abbudi. Because we don't know the wisdom behind it. This is how things are. So a turab does not apply. And when something is ta'abbudi, then you have to limit it and to make it very tight to what's only mentioned in the hadith. Not to make analogies or to apply other things to it. Because it's ta'abbudi. ولا بالماء الكثير. Also, there is no, it does not apply for if she's alone with lots of water. So that means it's only if it's tahara from tahur yasir. So if the water is more than qullatin, then it doesn't matter whether she's alone or not. ولا بالقليل إذا كان عندها من يشاهدها. ولا بالقليل, and not with the qalil. Now he used al-qalil, not al-yasir, which is the same thing. And if the water is qalil, that means less than qullatin, small amount of water, but she has with her someone seeing her. Someone is seeing her. It doesn't have to be like he's staring at her, but someone is present with her. She's not alone, as he says, كخلوة نكاح. Or she was, أو كانت صغيرة, or she was young in age. أو لم تستعمله في طهارة كاملة. Or, these are, you count 1, 2, 3, these are the exceptions. أو لم تستعمله في طهارة كاملة, or she did not use it in a complete tahara, as we mentioned. And all of these things here, rulings, is based on the statement that is mentioned above. So that means in the middle, she started being alone. And then when she was making wudu, after she washed her face, someone walks in. That's it. So that means the ruling here is for the adult man does not apply. That means an adult man can use the water or leftover water. ولا لما خلت به لطهارة خبث. Also, what does not apply here, if she's خلت به, if she's alone with this water, but to remove the khabath, to remove a physical impurity with this water. So if she used this water to remove an impurity in her arm, for example, she's not making wudu, she's not making ghusl. She's just removing something that is impure. That left over water, it's fine for an adult man to use. So as you see when you read the sharh, you kind of need to have a pencil or something like this to count the different cases or situations here, right? So and there's still one last statement, and then we go back and kind of make sure that it's clear. He says فإن لم يجد الرجل غير ما خلت به لطهارة الحدث. Now this is the مسألة. فإن لم, if the man did not find, يجد, فإن لم يجد الرجل, if the man does not find غير ما خلت به, other than what she was alone with for the طهارة الحدث. That means the man, if he has to make طهارة الحدث, not an extra tahara, just a tahara to be in state of wudu, and this man does not have any water except this water, the water that a woman was alone with in removing tahara with all the conditions that we mentioned. Then what's the ruling in this case? Should he make tayammum or should he use this water? The ruling is استعمله ثم تيمم وجوبا. Then he is to use it, to use this water. Then to make tayammum wujuban. To make tayammum wujuban, that means as an obligation. After he finishes, he makes the tayammum. So this is the ruling of it. So now when we go back, because this is now the end of the first category of water. This is the end of the first category of water. So when we just, this last mas'ala, this last matter, is with regards to the ولا يرفع حدث رجل طهور يسير. Let's read the زاد المستقنع and see if it's clear. ولا يرفع حدث رجل طهور يسير خلت به امرأة لطهارة كاملة عن حدث. So this is how the ruling is. So the حدث of a man, the state of not being in wudu for a man, is not lifted, is not changed by a small amount of tahur that imra'ah, a woman, is alone with, لطهارة كاملة, for a complete tahara, عن حدث, from hadath, from hadath, from the being in state of not tahara, and with all of the conditions that are mentioned here. Right, so this is how the matter is. So I hope it's clear, and it's as you said, this is to understand the mas'ala, to understand the madhab here, and it's and then the other riwayah that we mentioned. And then after that, he'll talk about the tahir. Talk about the tahir, or what's considered to be, what's the second category of water. So all of what we mentioned here is all tahur. It's all tahur. Okay, he says here, النوع الثاني من المياه, the second type of the water, which is الطاهر غير المطهر. So the second category of water is الطاهر. الطاهر is pure also, but it's different than المطهر. المطهر is what purifies others, pure in itself and purify others. الطاهر, that means it's pure in itself, but it does not purify the human being, is not permissible to be used for wudu or ghusl. So basically, this is what at-tahir means. It's pure. That means you can remove najasa with it, physical impurity, but you cannot use it to make wudu or ghusl. This is what the second category, which is at-tahir. He says, وَقَدْ أَشَارَ إِلَيْهِ بِقَوْلِهِ. He mentioned it by his statement. So after the last statement that we mentioned, Imam al-Hajjawi says in Zad al-Mustaqni', وَإِن تَغَيَّرَ لَوْنُهُ أَوْ طَعْمُهُ أَوْ رِيحُهُ. He did not mention the second category of water is called tahir. He just started right away. So in Rawd al-Murbi, he says this is the second category of water. وَإِن تَغَيَّرَ لَوْنُهُ. If its color, or طعمه, or its taste, أو, or ريحه, its smell, تغير, changed. Let's read the red first. If it's changed, بطبخ, see, this is one of the tricky ones. It's not tricky, just tricky in reading it. When you read Zad al-Mustaqni' only, you say بطبخ, because الطبخ is cooking, something cooked in it, as we will explain it. Here you see a kasra only, because since al-rawd, the sharh, is is part of the whole thing. So when you're reading it with the sharh, you say بطبخ طاهر. Okay, so but anyway, we'll talk about that inshallah. So وإن تغير لونه أو طعمه أو ريحه بطبخ أو ساقط فيه, or ساقط فيه. ساقط, that means something falls in it. أو, so there's more here to into the tahir. So the first type of tahir is إن تغير لونه أو طعمه أو ريحه. This is all of them, but either بطبخ or ساقط فيه or more. So let's count them and see which one comes one after the other inshallah. So he says here in the شرح أو كثير من صفة من تلك الصفات, or كثير or lots of change in one of the characteristics. لا يسير منها, not يسير, not a slight change. So the الطاهر, if the color of the water or taste of the water or smell of the water, if all of these changes, then it's طاهر and not طهور. Or one of the characteristics only, but not a small or not a slight change. So give you an example. We're talking about something pure false in the water, not impure. Impure, of course, it's already given the ruling that it's impure if it changes anything of it. But if something pure, say for example, you squeeze a lemon in a cup of water or in some amount of water that is to be less than the qullatin. If nothing changed, the lemon is pure. So if nothing changed, then it still stays as water, of course. If it changes to be called, and this is what will be mentioned later also, inshallah, and this is where the urf, where you see it, you perceive it that way. If someone sees it, he will consider it to be lemon juice. That means it's not water anymore. That means you cannot use it for wudu. And what changed it to be lemon juice is just maybe one lemon that you squeezed in it, right? That makes it a lemon juice. And al-yasir here, if you just squeezed few drops and the color of the water changed a little bit, but it's considered to be still water. Or when sometimes people, they put a lemon or a slice of a lemon in the cup of water, for example. You look at the cup, it's water, but it tastes slightly different. The color might be slightly different. This is yasir. This water can be used for wudu. The same thing if it's a ink, for example. If it changes the color completely, that's kathir. But if it's just slightly changed the color and it still looks like water, then it's still in the first category. So this is what he meant here. أو كثير من صفة من تلك الصفات. One characteristics, if it's changed so much, not yasir, not small amount or slight change, then it becomes tahir. That means it's pure, but you don't use it for wudu. He says here now the examples. How does the water changes with lots of change versus slight change? He says بطبخ طاهر فيه. بطبخ طاهر فيه. If you cook something tahir in it, you put, again, anything that you would cook, you put in the water to cook. And then as a result of that, the water changes. You put tomato sauce and you cook it. You can put small amount of tomato sauce, depends on how much water you have. And if you cook it in it, or if you just put it there versus you cook it in it, it changes the water. Then it's not water anymore, it's tomato sauce. Whether it's a light tomato sauce or a thick tomato sauce, doesn't matter. So it's not permissible to be used for wudu. or بطاهر من غير جنس الماء لا يشق صونه عنه ساقط فيه. The other case here, tahir, something pure gets into the water, that it's not water, so it's not ليس من غير جنس الماء. It's not different type of water, for example. And it's لا يشق صونه عنه. It is not difficult to remove it from the water. It's not difficult to remove it from the water or to detach it from the water. ساقط فيه. That means it fell in it. ساقط, سقط, يسقط, something falls. ساقط is the noun. So when you look at something fell into the water, you don't have to say سقط فيه كذا, but rather you say, this is, when you look at it, there's ساقط here, something fell. You call that thing that fall or that fell is a falling thing. So ساقط فيه, like what? كزعفران, saffron, right? And it's not difficult to remove it. So what's the ruling then? Then it's going to be here أو ساقط فيه. That means if it's not difficult to remove, كزعفران, then it becomes طاهر. لا تراب ولو قصدا. لا تراب ولو قصدا, not dust. The dust here, even if it's intentional, right? That means if you put dust or sand in the water and the water changes and intentionally you put the dust there, it does not take the tuhuriya from it. Does not make it tahir. It's still, you can use it for tuhur. Why? Because the turab or the dust is أحد الطهورين. It's one of the two things that we can use for tahara. Use it for tayammum if you don't have water. So that means it does not change the tahuriya of the water. Does not change the water to be something else. Right? So so that's why he says here أو ساقط فيه. So بطبخ أو ساقط فيه لا تراب كزعفران لا تراب ولو قصدا ولا ما لا يمازجه مما تقدم, and not what does not dissolve in it. ولا ما لا يمازجه, something that falls in it and it does not get dissolves in it, right? Like what we mentioned earlier, الدهن والملح المائي and things like this does not change the tahuriya of the water. So that means if it's dissolved in it, then it becomes طاهر. If it does not dissolve in it, فطاهر لأنه ليس بماء مطلق, because it's not absolute water. It's not absolute water. So that means there's something he called ماء مطلق. الماء المطلق is what's considered to be called water. So why? Because if you put a za'faran in it, if you put the saffron in it, if you put saffron in the water, right, and then the water becomes what? Becomes saffron water, not water anymore. It's called saffron water, right? This is how it changed. Even though it looks to you like it's water, but it's called something else. Or anything that is you put salt in it that makes it something else. Not that it's a little salty, but if you put it with, that's why if it's yasir, if it's something slight, and the itlaq of the water, that the fact that it's not anymore water, it's something else, then it becomes tahir, and this is where these examples are. Right? So that means if it's something that is not mixed with the water, as mentioned in the first category, then it stays tahur. But if it's mixed, dissolved, and it changes the characteristics of the water, and it's called something else, so either it's changed any of its characteristics with real change, or it removes the name of water from it. So two things here: whether the characteristics is changed with something that the change is clear, or it's not called water anymore. It's called something else, called lemon juice, called saffron water, called, like, for example, the word, I'm not sure what they call it, the rose water. Yeah, the rose water doesn't have any change to its color, but it tastes different. So, and it's called rose water. It's not called water anymore. So even if the taste is very slight, but now it becomes not ماء مطلق. ليس بماء مطلق, because the ayah in the Quran calls it water. So whatever in its original form, that's water. If it's changed to something else and people will call it something else, then it means it's not. It's tahir and not tahur. أو another case here, أو رفع بقليله حدث. Now this is a detailed mas'ala, and in the tahara and the salah, there will be many different things here that we need to understand. And when you put the effort in it, inshallah, it makes a big difference in the way that we study. And it's okay to struggle with it. It makes things easier later, inshallah. أو رفع بقليله حدث. So now this is another mas'ala within the categories of الطاهر. رفع in the passive tense. بقليله, and the rafa, as we said, lifted, and which is a non-physical meaning. That means a person becomes from a state of not having wudu to have wudu. أو رفع بقليله. That means with a small amount of it, حدث. حدث is whether it's akbar or asghar, whether it's major like janaba or asghar, meaning not being in state of wudu. So if it's a small amount of water, so qalil here or yasir, that means it's less than qullatin. So we have a small amount of water, and someone used this small amount of water to make wudu from a hadath. That means he had broken his wudu and he's now making wudu. Or for janaba if it's ghusl, and it's a small amount of water, less than qullatin. But who مكلف أو رفع بقليله حدث مكلف. حدث مكلف means someone is responsible for his actions, meaning an adult. أو صغير, or a small child, he used it for wudu. فطاهر, طاهر, it's pure but not tahur. Pure but not tahur, because it's a small amount of water and someone used it for tahara. For tahara after hadath, after breaking one's wudu. So the water is pure, but it's not permissible to be used for wudu or ghusl. This is basically what is mentioned here. So this is where they call it al-ma'u musta'mal, the used water. This is the used water. If it's lots of water, then it doesn't matter. But this is with regards to al-ma' al-qalil. And there's another riwayah before we continue that it's okay to be used as long as nothing is changed in the water. That means it's still tahur. But we're going here through I'm talking about the practical matter, if this is where many of the ulama are upon, and also riwayah Imam Ahmad. So أو رفع بقليل حدث مكلف أو صغير فطاهر. Then it's طاهر, not طهور. Why? What's the evidence? لحديث أبي هريرة. حديث أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه: لا يغتسلن أحدكم في الماء الدائم وهو جنب. رواه مسلم. لا يغتسلن, this is forbidding. None of you should make ghusl in the الماء الدائم. الماء الدائم is the non-running water. The non-running water. Doesn't have to be stagnant. The stagnant one that has a smell, it's the ماء الآجن. But الماء الدائم is a small pond. So the Prophet ﷺ said, none of you should make ghusl in a pond or a non-running water وهو جنوب, while he's in state of janab. So he forbade a person from making ghusl in such water. This hadith in Sahih Muslim. So how the ulama they explain this? Is there a illah or no illah? Is there a wisdom behind it? That means if a person in janaba, then or an outcome to this, or a person is just forbidden from doing it. So if there's an outcome to this, that means if a person makes ghusl in such a water, that means the water now it's less than qullatin, then it's not permissible for someone else to use it for ghusl of janaba or wudu. And that's what he says here. وَعُلِمَ مِنْهُ. Then it's to be known from what's mentioned above. أن المستعمل في الوضوء والغسل المستحبين طهور كما تقدم. That المستعمل means the used water in wudu or ghusl mustahabbain, recommended wudu and ghusl, not an obligatory wudu and ghusl. Then it's tahur from the first category. That means you can use it for wudu and ghusl كما تقدم, as it's mentioned before earlier in the first type, which is الطهور. And then another one: وأن المستعمل في رفع الحدث إذا كان كثيرا طهور. The musta'mal, the used water, if it's used to رفع الحدث, whether it's major or minor, if it's كثيرا, if it's lots of water, then it's of course it's طهور. If it's above the قلتين, it's طهور. لكن but يكره الغسل في الماء الراكد. But it's disliked, makruh, for someone to make ghusl in the non-running water. So they made the nahi here on the karah. Clear? So this mas'ala of al-ma' al-musta'mal, right? And this is where, as it's mentioned here, if it's less and a person used it to remove the hadath, whether it's major hadath or minor hadath, then whatever is left is not permissible to be used for wudu or ghusl. But if this musta'mal water, and again, musta'mal, that means it's less than the qullatin, but was used for a wudu that is not from hadath, renewing the wudu when a person did not break his wudu. The same thing with ghusl. Then it does not make it tahir, it stays as tahur. And of course, if it's more than qullatin, it's no problem whatsoever if the water has been used. But then if it's kathir, if it's lots of water, then it's still makruh to make ghusl in it if it's a non-running water. So the non-running water, either it's less meaning a small amount or big amount. Less than قلتين, more than the قلتين. If it's less than the قلتين, it's forbidden. If it's more than the قلتين and it's not running, it's disliked because it would contaminate it and so on. Someone would say swimming pools and things like this. No, it's different because, and that's why it's running. And they have to, if they leave it for a few days, it becomes not good for someone to use it. So it has to be running, and they put chemicals in it and things like this. And of course, what, as long as the water is not changed, this is the other opinion where it's then everything is fine. So, but here we're, رفع بقليل حدث. This is the مسألة of الماء المستعمل. He says ولا يضر اغتراف المتوضئ. لا يضر. It's not harmful. Does not affect the water. Means it still can be used for the طهارة, for the wudu. اغتراف المتوضئ. المتوضئ is the one that is making wudu. اغتراف إلا من اغترف غرفة بيده, as it's mentioned in the Quran. الاغتراف is to put your hand in the water and get a handful of water, whether it's with both hands or with one hand. So you stick your hands in the container to get water out. So that doesn't affect the water. If the person is making wudu like this, he's taking the handful of water outside. There's no harm in this. لمشقة تكرره, because it keeps on happening and it's repeated. So al-mashaqqa, or the difficulty, makes the matter easy. So it does not contaminate the water, does not change the water, even though you might think it's musta'mal now. No, it's ightaraf. He's just taken some water in it. He's not making wudu and the wudu is falling in it. He's just taking a handful of water and things like this. Does not affect the status of the water. بخلاف من عليه حدث أكبر. But it's different for the one that has حدث أكبر, someone that has a major حدث which requires غسل, requires a shower here, غسل. فإن نوى, if he has the نية, فإن نوى, if he made the intention, وانغمس هو أو بعضه في قليل. فإن نوى, that means he has the intention to make غسل, to be able to make salah and so on. وانغمس, and he انغمس. الانغماس is to be dipped, to be immersed in the water, which is sufficient for ghusl. If the entire body is immersed in the water with the madmada and istinshaq. هو, himself, أو بعضه, or some of him, some of that individual. He jumped into the water and just to his waist or above. في قليل. في قليل, that means what? In a small amount of water. What's قليل again? Less than قلتين. And he has حدث أكبر. He has to take a shower because he's in janaba or so. لم يرتفع حدثه. His حدث is not lifted. Why? Because it's a small amount of water and he gets in it, and وصار الماء مستعملا, and the water becomes مستعمل. The ماء becomes used now, which that means if it's a lot of water, it doesn't matter. But it's now it becomes مستعمل, and it does not lift his status because it's a small amount of water. Because of this issue of al-musta'mal, because when he jumped in it, or when he immersed himself in it, that means now his body, get into the water, so the whatever is left in the water, since it's less, becomes tahir, not tahur. Right? This is as a result of the previous mas'ala. ويصير الماء مستعملا في الطهارتين بانفصاله. This is a very important principle here. The water يصير becomes مستعملا, becomes a ماء مستعمل. So remember, what's the mas'ala here? It's the ruling of الماء المستعمل. What is the ruling of the used water? This is what you need to give it a title or whatever, so that you know the ruling of it. الماء المستعمل, according to this, and is if it's كثير, no problem. Right? We're talking only about if it's قليل, if it's less than قلتين. If it's قليل, less than قلتين, right, and a person used this amount of water for a mandatory purification, then whatever is left in the container is not permissible to remove the tahara or remove the hadath of someone else if it's less, right? If it's less amount of water. And here he says ويصير الماء مستعملا في الطهارتين بانفصاله. But what is the used water? Is بانفصاله. the water has to be detached completely from the person. It fell down. لا قبله, not before it detached from the body. ما دام مترددا على الأعضاء, as long as it's keep on going onto the organs. What that means is, if someone is making wudu and he took water to wash his right arm, right? And the water that drips from the right arm falls into his hand or falls into the other arm. That's fine, even though that's musta'mal, that's used. But it did not go down yet. It's still going from one organ to the other. That's fine. That's why it has to be munfasil. It has to detach completely from the body when a person is making wudu. And the same thing with ghusl. Clear? Otherwise, it becomes a very difficult matter. So, and if, of course, ulama, according to the madhab, there's rulings that they apply these things, whether of course, it's the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, but also this water that is used, right? It's like when you use something for something else and it's become not valid anymore because you already used it, right? If you like if you use anything, like the water, of course, to remove the najasa becomes obvious, right? And this is how people even act in their life. The water that you use for cleaning a dirty car, for example, right? Does the water that gets used and goes down in a container, people would not use it for another car that is clean. They would throw it away because it's already used. So this is the issue of the used water. But here, the hukm here is not a physical matter, but it's according to the religious meanings of it. Right? So this is, first of all, it becomes musta'mal after it's detached from the person. If it's used, keeps on going into the organs before it goes to the container, then it's not even considered to be musta'mal. And for the musta'mal, again, this is how in the madhab the matter is mentioned. Right? So something on the side, if you're doing something or you see the ulama saying something which is another riwayah or people are doing with the musta'mal, as long as there's no impurity in it, it's permissible to be used. But it's important that, and you can adopt this opinion perfectly because this is what, the more you study and the more that you take that opinion, and this is absolutely fine. So, but as long as we're understanding what is meant here. There's another mas'ala here that is continuing with the different types of at-tahir, but we'll stop here inshallah at his statement أو غمس فيه أو غمس فيه. You need to of course to read it over and over again and to get acquainted with it and to get used to knowing what it means, so it becomes easy inshallah ta'ala. طيب, let me stop here. So going back to what we read and to see that it's clear. The last mas'ala in the tahur, this is what we took today. ولا يرفع حدث رجل طهور يسير خلت به امرأة لطهارة كاملة عن حدث. And in the tahir, we said وإن تغير لونه أو طعمه أو ريحه بطبخ أو ساقط فيه أو رفع بقليله حدث. Right? And then أو. But if you go down, then you will see the last word here. This is the reading for all of these things. Fatahir. Right? So if I read it to you again, I'm going quickly here. Let's read again. Look at the red. وإن تغير لونه أو طعمه أو ريحه. If its color or taste or smell changed بطبخ, with being cooked, or أو ساقط فيه, or something fell in it. أو رفع بقليل حدث, or small amount less than قلتين lifted a حدث. أو غمس فيه, or immersed in it. يدي قائم, the hand of قائم, someone get up من نوم ليل, from night sleep. ناقض لوضوء, and he already not in state of wudu. أو, or كان آخر غسلة زالت النجاسة بها, or the last washing that the najasa was removed by it, the last washing, then all of these cases are tahir. It's not najis, it's tahir. Tahir and not tahur. And it's munfasil, it's already detached. But we didn't talk about the غمس فيه yet. We'll do that inshallah ta'ala next time. So that we have a chance to review again from the tahir from the beginning, so that this is how the ilm and the knowledge get to sunk in. You have to repeat it. And the more you repeat it, the more that you would benefit from it, inshallah ta'ala. طيب, we'll stop here, inshallah. If you have any questions, even from the morning session, that's fine, inshallah. And hopefully everything is clear. And if it's not clear, please let me know as far as what we're studying, inshallah. Does this ruling refer to the water remaining in the container after wudu but was not used in the wudu itself? No, if a person, okay, this is a good question. Al-Musta'mal, if you refer to the Musta'mal, it's used. So if it's not used, that means these rulings do not apply. So what I mean by this is, if you have a container of water and you're getting the water with a cup, so you put a cup inside and you take it out and you make wudu. That container, these rulings do not apply to it because we did not use it for wudu. What's used is the water that gets detached from the body. So a person, either he's making wudu from a container, he puts his hands in it and the water falls in it. But if he puts his hand and he take it out onto the side and he makes the wudu, these rulings do not apply. It's not musta'mal anymore. And the same thing apply if a person is standing in a tub, right? This is now situations here. You're standing in a tub and you're pouring water on yourself. And then the water is raised because the water is not going down. The water is preserved in this container, this tub that you're standing in. Now your foot is covered with water. Does this water considered to be musta'mal or not musta'mal? Used or not used? Do you have to wash your foot at the end with a fresh water, or it's sufficient that it's immersed in some water? This is the ruling of musta'mal. Right? So this is also has to be mentioned clear. And also I wanted to mention with the mas'ala of the water that is a woman is alone with, the Prophet ﷺ, he made wudu with the fadl, with what Maymuna radiallahu anha, she left from her wudu. So that's what the other opinion is. Plus, with no doubt, even according to this and even according to the madhab, that if they're both together, so it has to be she's alone. So if a man and a woman, his wife, for example, they're making wudu together at the same time, and the water is mixed between both of them, no problem whatsoever. There is no harm in this. There's no difference of opinion there. طيب, barakallahu fikum. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make this is benefiting for each and every one of us. And we'll continue inshallah ta'ala tomorrow, or for the fiqh after tomorrow inshallah. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. سبحانك اللهم ربنا وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.